And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Poseidon. Co-host James McVeigh is Drew. Make up a horrible lie about him. On the spot.
He's just hanging out in his parents' basement hating things.
Oh, God. I said make up a lie. Anyway.
It's not like they would know that.
Co-host James McVeigh is not with us tonight. But this is Fermenting Opinions, the podcast and Google Hangout show in search of a more palatable political ferment. This is August 8th, 2019, and we are here to talk about these United States of guns. That's off of your meme, Drew. Drew, our meme lord, created a great advertisement for this thing that's gotten a lot of traction actually. So thank you, Drew, again. See, got another shout out. But we are joined tonight by Drew, Lacey, RJ, William, myself, and Haley should be joining us. As anybody knows, it's dominating the media cycle right now. We've had 3 major shootings last weekend, basically. I think the first one was on the 28th in California. It was some kind of festival. 3 people were killed, plus the shooter, 13 wounded. A few days later, we have on August 3rd, we had 2 shootings in one day, leaving about 31 people dead, dozens wounded in both El Paso and Dayton, Ohio. These all seem to happen for different reasons, but there's commonalities between the shootings. Do we want to start with the first shooting? Because it seems like it's the least talked about and least sort of understood. But to my knowledge, the reason, or I guess what motivated the shooter, is that he had like a hit list of politicians, religious figures that were on both sides of the aisle, but that he had expressed sort of animus at all these people. Now, what caused him to shoot up some kind of like food festival or something in California? I don't know how he got from his ideology to that specifically. If anyone has any light to shed, I'm all ears.
That was a garlic festival out in California, correct?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Garlic festival.
Okay. I don't recall quite. I really don't recall very much about that one in particular, because it does seem like we got the El Paso shooter maybe within a couple days. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was within like 2 or 3 days, because that.
And it was like it was one of those shootings where, and I'm sorry that it sounds somewhat crass to put it that way, but it was a much more limited in scope shooting than, say, the Walmart shooting, or even I think the Ohio shooting. Although that doesn't necessarily seem. Basically, the El Paso shooting was the worst of the 3, from my understanding.
A 6-year-old boy was shot at the garlic festival.
Right,
it was like a little kid.
Yeah.
Right. And none of that is, of course, meant to sound like I'm trying to detract from the tragedy of that. That's not the case. It's more like just pure numbers at this point.
Yeah, it sounds like it was 4 people died, and it was used, and the weapon was a semi-automatic rifle. 13 people were injured.
Right. Looks like Haley joined us too.
By a 19-year-old.
Right. I don't recall too much about that one, except that it was a garlic festival or something, and it seemed to me like when I actually found out about it, it was the following morning rather than contemporaneous with the actual shooting. But that's all I can say about that one.
Yeah, the news didn't really drop until like kind of the next day already. So
right. And I was looking at the pictures and I'm like, wow, that's awfully specific.
Well, this is what I mean. So I'm reading. It says, on the day of the shooting, the shooter made 2 posts to his account, one which complained about the event congesting the countryside with, quote, hordes of mestizos and Silicon Valley white twats, and instructed people to read the 19th century book Might is Right, a pseudonym proto-fascist manifesto that promotes racial violence and anti-Semitism and is popular in white supremacist and neo-Nazi circles.
Lacey, where was that posted?
This was on Wiki, so who knows?
No. I mean, where did he post that?
I thought on the internet, but maybe not.
No, I know on the internet, sure, but was it like 8chan? Was it Reddit? Was it?
I think Instagram.
Yeah, no, I
Instagram.
think that sounds right. Instagram. That's what I recall. Now that you say that.
Sorry, I was just giving some facts about it.
No, that's cool. No, it's good to know the details because it wasn't. I guess the reason why I'm getting to that is because there seems like, again, similar and also very different reasons that led to each of these things. Now, you said that this guy was sort of citing like white supremacist rhetoric, what have you. I don't know if that by itself is enough to call him that, but maybe, I don't know. It seems a little vague. I honestly wish we had a little bit more detail on it. But again, just days after that, we were in the middle of, in our Facebook group, we were in the middle of bickering about it when two more happened, a couple days later. Obviously the big one, the one that seems to occupy most of the media attention, is the El Paso shooting, because the guy left a manifesto. That was something like 2,300 words, basically acknowledging that he agreed with the New Zealand shooter and his motives and his fear of racial replacement, and as a counter to the Hispanic invasion, essentially. And then he got into like environmental reasons and America's wasteful, and yet he wouldn't shoot other Americans, even if they were part of the problem, that he would only shoot non-Americans. Don't know how you can look at a person and tell if they're American or not. Well, within reason, right? You can't tell who's not an American. I should say it that way. But that he...
Well, depending on your ideology, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're wearing an American flag and,
Or if you're just saying that people who are brown are not American.
Yeah.
Well, I have a hypothetical for the group. So you just mentioned he wrote that manifesto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the El Paso.
I've heard...
I don't remember any of their names. They don't deserve to have them repeated.
Sure, but what's the difference? I've heard a lot of people that are saying that, Ohio was just a liberal leftist that did this, and setting aside the fact that it shouldn't be a who's doing it more, it should all be it's wrong.
Yeah.
But I mean, isn't there a difference, or is there not a difference between Facebook posts by Ohio shooter who says, I'm an Antifa, so he's anti-fascist or whatever, and I guess extreme leftist views, but is that the same, or should it be treated differently than a frickin' manifesto where it says
that's a great point, Lacey. And I think that the important thing here is we're really trying to figure out what people's motivation are, right?
Okay, you can play
it. What actually motivated a shooter is not the same thing as what did the person who happened to do this shooting like to do on the weekends. So if a bunch of shooters happen to like NASCAR, maybe that ends up being statistically significant, but trying to tie each person who decides to do something like this to a political ideology within the relatively narrow American political ideology that we have is just silly. We have the El Paso shooter putting out a manifesto saying, here's why I did this. You will not replace us. This is white supremacy. And then we have the Dayton shooter who didn't really leave us that many clues, but happened to like Elizabeth Warren on Twitter. Those two things are not equivalent. I think that we should be looking at motivation, and I think that it's relatively easy to delineate actual motivation from things that someone just happened to say that they liked at a certain point in time.
I think it's important to note that the Gilroy shooter and the El Paso shooter, both of them those acts are being treated as hate crimes. I know that there's actually no such thing as domestic terrorism, but those two are, and the Dayton shooter is not, because it doesn't appear to have been motivated on those same terms. Okay, so he was a leftist who liked Warren. It doesn't appear that he shot people who didn't like Warren. That wasn't his motivation for doing it. The other people, they did this act for these, and it appears to be for these reasons. One of them has a manifesto, so it's very clear those reasons. So yeah, whenever you're trying to start to compare something, whenever someone is just whenever that motivation isn't clearly there, it's not a fair comparison.
Gotcha.
Right, and I think
go ahead, Drew, and then William. We haven't heard from you yet, so I wanted to give you a chance. But go ahead, Drew.
Well, I mean, one thing that I found kind of interesting is they were showing pictures of, I think it was the Ohio shooter, and this to me just sort of smacks of just no planning, just I'm gonna go out and commit a crime sort of thing. Like the guy was wearing like eyes and ear protection. Like, did he honestly think he was going to come out of this alive? I mean, it seems like if you really wanted to do that, you wouldn't be caring about your eyes and ears, and that's part of it to me, at least. It sort of seems like with at least the manifesto and the El Paso shooter, there was a lot more planning and thought that went into it. This is just somebody just acting. Oh, I go shooting. This is what I wear. Let me go do this dumb thing.
Sure, William.
I don't really have a lot to add to what everybody else has said. Obviously, all of these shootings are horrible, and it's a shame. It's truly despicable that any of these innocent people had to die, and they were obviously all disturbed in one way or another. Whether it was, your guess is as good as mine as far as what motivated this person or that person. I mean, certainly political ideologies can be taken to extremes, and people can decide to do things to try to advance some kind of ideology. I agree with Lacey that the shooter in Ohio was probably just a nut who was just trying to shoot people and probably wasn't motivated by any ideology. So, it's terrible. You guys have already done a good job of describing the situation. I don't have much to add.
Okay. There's one thing I wanted to point out, and maybe this has changed since earlier reports, because a lot of these things come out and everyone scrambles to be first rather than right, and so things get sort of corrected as we go. Well, actually, two things. First thing, because it's just worth mentioning, when the El Paso shooting happened, I think it was like Breitbart or somebody came out first generally saying it was gang related, and that was confirmed by police. That was a complete lie. So worth noting, but also I guess this is causing me to be a little bit more circumspect in saying this, but my understanding in the Ohio shooting was that one of the people killed was the shooter's sister. Is that still confirmed? Does anybody know?
I read that a couple of days ago. I don't know if it's still true, but
wait,
Yes.
What was the question?
The Ohio shooter killed his own sister.
Yes,
She was the first person
correct.
killed.
Gotcha. We can all agree that these are all disturbed people. Whether or not we can classify this as a mental illness thing, I don't know. That maybe is a topic for a different segment here. But
it's certainly a devaluing of human life.
Yeah,
and I think that's the biggest problem.
There's red flags that are similar on devaluing of human life. That you can talk about Hispanics as one group to be opposed, like that's obviously dehumanizing. If you can talk about the Ohio shooter had like a list of people that he wanted to kill and women that he wanted to rape. And again, I'm less familiar about the California shooting. Lace, you're muted still. You look like you're trying to say something.
Also, the thing about the Ohio shooter that was interesting and unique from everyone else that you didn't hear a lot about was that he was a member of this like band that apparently they have bands out there that are all about like the sexual like exploitation and just destruction of women, like in terms of like rape culture type stuff. And so they have like, apparently it's like a rock, like a hardcore rock that's like awful and
Pornocore.
Yeah, like it's like violent and nasty and terrible and rapey.
So like Buck Cherry, but worse? Or?
Like a bunch of like incel type.
Yeah.
But not apparently completely, because his bandmates, and his bandmates' defense came out and immediately they were like, look, we knew he was a little out there, but we had no idea about this. And they I think stopped having the band even, I think. They disbanded.
And they pulled the material off the web as well.
Yeah, great.
So it's pornocore. They say really shocking things. It's basically like just a shock sort of rock and roll punk style, and they're just saying things that are shocking.
Yeah.
But apparently this guy thought that these were ideals, like things to live up to, things to strive toward, and that's what his bandmates specifically said. This was not what we were about. Like, this was a joke. It was meant to be a joke and just to be shocking to people. And now looking back, a lot of times he was like, yeah, this is a thing that we can do. So
Wow.
I mean, I don't know what to do with that, except for the fact that this is a sub genre of music that is out there, and apparently at least one adherent of it and, you know, player in a band was not just doing it for show.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's it sounds just like that kind. It's just edginess for the sake of being edgy. Maybe would be a good way to describe it. But that guy meant it for real, obviously, because he, I guess, at some point decided that those were violent fantasies that he couldn't not act on at some point, obviously. And he died, I think, in less than a minute, I think, of starting fire, and he killed like 9 or so people himself. I'm not going to get like deeply into the statistics there.
It was like within 30 seconds.
But the point is that, yeah, he opened fire, and within 30 seconds, I mean, he just ended so many lives and, you know, destroyed so many more. I think that was actually similar with the Garlic Festival shooter, that he not as damaging as Ohio, but like it was like within a minute or so of him starting to shoot, because I mean there was a heavy police presence at the festival, and they went after him immediately, and you know, and they shot him. He ended up taking his own life, according to, I guess, the coroner's report or whatever. But like that, they ended it extremely quickly, and yet that wasn't enough. And this kind of goes to sort of like the next phase of what I want to talk about, is that, you know, the trope about the good guy with the gun stopping the bad guy with the gun, like that is really not bearing out in either of these situations or in general. You know, and people have made a joke, like, if, you know, you can shoot up a Walmart in Texas and nobody stops you, like that. I mean, how is a good guy with a gun a thing, you know? So that's just a thought, if we want to springboard off of that, maybe. Anybody?
There you go. Oh, it looked like Lace looked like she was ready to talk.
Lace, you got something? Go for it.
All I know is, and maybe y'all have seen the statistic, but I had a long time ago read that statistically, the more guns, if you have a gun, you are more likely to get shot by a gun, period. And I get it, like, well, not me, it won't be me, but still, you're raising your risk. And so I just think, I don't know, I always think of that statistic. There was something you just said, David, that made me think of that statistic.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's also true. And another thing we're focused here on, like, mass shootings, what stops, like, because this is what scares suburban white people, right? That you can't really be safe anywhere. You can't go to the grocery store. You can't go to Walmart without maybe someone deciding that, you know, that they're having a falling down moment, or, you know, enacting the final solution, or whatever it is going on in their head, and just lighting the place up. There's no real protection from that. That's the real societal problem. And that's why also, you know, like, there was a bunch of shootings in Chicago the same weekend. A lot of people brought up there was like 7 people killed and 55 people shot, like, that same weekend. Okay, you know, over, you know, different incidences. They're all interpersonal, right? That's all, like,
right. That's common for this time of year in Chicago as well. I'm originally from there, and when, you know, school's out and you have, you know, warm temperatures, people are out there. People and there's a lot of gang violence in Chicago, and I think that a substantial portion, if not all of the shootings, were related to gang violence, or could be attributed to gang violence or organized crime in some manner.
Right. I mean, and so, you know, but again, the reality is, like, you know, the soccer mom that shopped at Walmart in, like, Spring Hill, Tennessee or something like that, like, they're not worried about being personally affected by, like, you know, like inner city gang violence, or, you know, or this interpersonal kind of violence that happens in poorer neighborhoods kind of thing, because that's not them. But it's the lunatic with the with the AR. That's the one that you can't do anything about. There's no reason to it, and that's why it's getting the attention that it is. And I think that's on one level tragic that it's only when it directly affects us that we decide that it matters. But like, is that not worth? I mean, and I hate. And the other thing is, people say, "Oh, mass tragedy. Don't politicize it." I think this is, if you want this to stop, like, how can you not politicize it now? That to me is like, this is an important moment. If we want to stop having these kinds of moments, so
The important moment was when we did nothing with Sandy Hook. Now it's just sort of an ongoing thing.
Yep.
Thanks, Haley.
Nailed it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Agree.
not wrong, but I'm saying, because we keep getting chances, right? Because this keeps happening, and it's not at least not my position as a gun owner, to ban all the guns or anything like that, or necessarily mandatory roundups and things like that. But like, we need to do something to make this stop. And if we don't do it while the super short attention spans of America is focused on this, we've already exceeded Trump's attention span, by the way, but ours collectively, I mean, he already made it about himself. But if we don't do something about it now, like, we just get to wait for the next one to decide when it's time to start trying. Because you're right, Haley, started with Sandy Hook, started before that, really, started with Columbine, like, and yet we've done nothing because we have super lax laws.
Well, and I mean, if we're going to wait for a certain mourning period to do anything about these things, and they're going to be happening within 24 hours, which is what we saw between El Paso and Dayton, that's not going to work. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
I agree. Any other thoughts?
I mean, just in thinking about Chicago and everything, that it's definitely like something that right-leaning pundits always point to, of like, why should we talk about gun control? But it's not an issue of, it's not an example of saying that gun laws don't work. It's an example that local gun laws can fail. And so in order to actually do something, I think it has to be on a national level. Just because, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, and to be fair, part of the issue with Illinois, because Illinois has some pretty intense gun laws. Part of the issue is that you have Indiana and
that's what
some
I mean.
other states that are in close proximity where they are much cheaper. Like Cook County, that's the county in which Chicago is. They tax the ever-loving shit out of every single thing related to guns, like ammo, whatnot. And if you live close to the Indiana border, I mean, Chicago's not that far from the Indiana border. You can cross over, buy your ammo, buy your guns, and cross back into Illinois without.
I mean, there's a train going from Indiana to Chicago every, the what is it, the South Bend train? So, wait, I don't know.
It just actually got canceled.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, Gary's right on the corner. That's right on the border. Has a lot of gun stores. But yeah, so that's it's not an example of when gun laws and gun control has failed. It's an example when localized gun laws aren't going to be able to accommodate for the fact that they're not everywhere. And whenever you can still go somewhere else, buy a gun, and then cross back into city limits with it, and it's there's not like people checking the border of Cook County to see if you have any weapons. It's that I find that talking point flippant.
Yeah, I agree. But what can we do? Localized gun laws are not working. One of you, it might have been Haley, proposed that it's federal legislation is necessary. It's my understanding that say like expanding universal background checks is overwhelmingly popular amongst, both gun owners and non-gun owners. But we mostly have the Senate to blame why nothing is happening there. My understanding is that there are calls amongst, it's like 200 some mayors, city mayors, for the Senate to come back into session so that they can move what is otherwise just a messaging bill from the House to get that passed. Do we expect that's going to have, first of all, what would have to happen to make that bill get through? That's realistic. Anything, first of all, and second of all, what do we think the impact of, say, expanding universal background checks?
We don't know yet. Obviously, Trump came out 5 or 6 days ago saying he was all in favor of background checks.
Mm-hmm.
And on Tuesday, got a call from Wayne LaPierre
Mm-hmm.
saying you should rethink this position. So the idea of getting it past the Senate in the first place, which Mitch McConnell, from his rehab for his shoulder, has said he will bring it to the floor. Even if it gets past the Senate, it is not clear that it is something that will be written into law. Should it get written into law, what difference will it make? Sure, it'll make a difference. Absolutely. There are people right now who are buying guns who should not be able to, who would be caught if there were a federal registry that had no loopholes for local sales or gun show sales.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very low impact style of legislation, though. So it should pass because it's giving a 1 for a 10, in that you're giving away almost nothing if you are a pro-gun person,
Mm-hmm.
and you are getting the adulation of people who are saying, there we go. The Congress has done something about guns, finally.
Yeah, no, and I agree with all of that. And I think well, not just another aspect, the key aspect in my mind is, and forget about the gun lobby itself, Wayne LaPierre, that you mentioned, but gun owners, people who deal in guns. We're talking about licensed gun dealers. We're talking about firearms experts. In the military, in the private sector, in law enforcement. These are the people that we should be having conversations with about ways to make, our. It sounds so cliche to make our streets safe, but to make us safer, and to reduce the frequency with which this stuff is happening. To me, it feels like, again, Haley, you mentioned Sandy Hook all these years ago, that this feels like the possibility of a new tipping point, but we have to push for it. Anybody else want to go?
I something that I learned recently, which was actually surprising to me, was that the majority, more than 50% or something like that, of guns, not necessarily ammo or anything like that, sold in America are sold by small private business owners with less than 3 employees kind of businesses. Mm-hmm. And that was surprising to me. And so, I think that, my dad's a small business owner. We probably all know numerous people who are small business owners. So less red tape that you have to sell your product is better for you. And also, when you are being the vehicle that's pushing the lion's share of the product being pushed by the gun lobbies, I don't see them ever wanting to have any more red tape involved in their product sales whenever they're the majority. And it was just something that I just recently learned that I found surprising, because I just didn't realize that the over 50% were sold by such small businesses. And yeah, my immediate thought is they're not going to want any more red tape. So I think they would push back. All right, so yeah, I just think that's sort of expand my mind on how to think about the issue. But I still think, so many other things have so much more red tape, in order to sell juice. Like, you gotta do so much more. Anyway.
I've been sketching I've been thinking I'm much more extreme about it. I would think we would need to have a bunch of Democrats take over and pass comprehensive reform, which I guess would have to, I don't know if it would be, we wouldn't have to repeal the Second Amendment, obviously. It could just be reform. And if I were doing that, I would do it as saying, okay, type of gun. I think everyone should be allowed to have a pistol or something that isn't automatic, that's like a handgun or an antique gun, there could be hunting guns, but only people, and everyone's going to have to pay money. And first of all, go through background checks, psychological evaluations to be able to get a gun in the first place. And then you would want to, everyone has to pay fees that are going to be out the wazoo expensive. It's a privilege to get to own a gun. It's like a car, you're going to pay fees. And then you could allow hunting licenses, but you could allow hunting guns, but only to people that pay more and have even higher levels that they have to meet of qualification. And you could still use automatic weapons at authorized shooting ranges, but they have to be highly regulated as well. And then if you are allowed to be a gun owner, like I said, you have to pay fees. You have to keep it in a safe that's locked in your house. You have to continue your gun owner education, just like a lawyer would have to go to a CLE. You have to go to a CGE, continuing your gun education every year. You have to maintain your qualifications to be able to continue as a responsible gun. This is the shit you have to do to maintain your ownership of your gun. And then lastly, I think there should be a buyback for people that either don't want to do it or can't do it. And if Republicans, I would love to hear Republicans tell me, oh, you can't just distinguish among people by their, ability to afford guns. No, you should be able to you are going to have to pay more money. You're going to have to pay money if you want to keep your gun. And I think we should allow it should be done in phases. Obviously this couldn't be done. If it were me, I'd love to get it done in just one comprehensive thing, but this would be my plan that maybe couldn't all be done in one, it would take time to do, but this is I think that's solid.
I think the ultimate test, though, is it's going to be challenged in the courts, right? As soon as any step of the phase all at once, or any step of that phase starts going into place. And so, you would need if you're not going to repeal the second, you need a good test case to get to SCOTUS that's going to read into, correct some of the case law that's out there already, and read into well-regulated militia into the
Yeah.
And then
absolutely. Yeah.
So, and unless and until that happens, that's going to be, and I don't see the court makeup right now. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't know if they would do that.
No,
and so I think
you're right. I think you're absolutely right, Haley. I think the problem here is that since Heller and McDonald, we've been given a Supreme Court that is misreading the Second Amendment as it was written, at the time it was written, and as it had been interpreted for 200 years. And until you can overcome that, you're not going to be able to really institute the source of change that is necessary to directly confront the gun violence problem that America uniquely faces.
So you need to get a good test case. The Masterpiece cake, that was a good test case for that issue. You would just need a good test case.
Well, yeah, but they just decided that on the not merits.
No, but I'm talking about
What was the rule set in Heller, Haley, or RJ?
RJ knows it better than I do. So
Heller was that Heller was the first Supreme Court case ever to decide that there was a personal right to own guns in America as established by the Second Amendment of the Constitution.
Right, but they also said that it was not without boundaries.
Right, no, but
well.
but that was the first case that decided that you had the right personally to own guns based on the Second Amendment, which was, 230 years after the Constitution was enshrined.
And then what was McDonald?
McDonald was basically the same thing, but it was related to Chicago, because Chicago had really, really strict gun legislation that essentially, for the most purposes, outlawed firearms within Cook County. Like, I guess, personally held firearms, if I recall correctly.
Gotcha. By the way, William, you and I have the dubious honor of being the only non-lawyers present on the call. So if this gets a little legally wonky, I apologize. I'm fascinated by this stuff.
Oh, me too. I'd love this. I love to talk about this stuff. This is really interesting.
Well, cool. Gosh. So yes, fermenting opinions. That we have swag, guys. That you can.
I actually have some ideas about what we could do.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
All right. Okay, well, I do agree that, with the current makeup of the court, it's not likely that you're going to get any kind of substantial gun ban passed. I mean, and also you're going to have a whole lot of political opposition. So it seems to me like a lot of the problem is that basically you have these two factions, these two political sides fighting against each other. You got one side wants to limit guns or ban guns. The other side wants to, protect the ability to own guns and things like that. And there's a whole lot of momentum, or there's a whole lot of I guess support on both sides. So it's really kind of, unless you don't have don't have a consensus, it's really kind of hard to get major changes like that implemented. So one thing you could do is you could just completely sidestep the issue, and you could come up with a solution that probably everybody would agree on, that would probably achieve the same thing that you're trying to accomplish. So what if you totally abandon the idea of like passing gun confiscation laws or whatever gun laws, just said, fine, Second Amendment means what you say it means. We're not going to try to take your guns away. You can keep your guns. You can do it. We're not going to fight that battle anymore. But what we're going to do is we're going to pass laws that if you assault someone with malicious intent with a firearm, it's like a mandatory 50-year sentence or whatever, just something very, very painful. So that would basically be a de facto gun law. If anybody ever used a gun in anger or with malicious intent,
well, there already are components that are like that.
I actually think regulating ammo. So if you're going to say that that's what it means, regulate ammo. You can.
No. This was a Chris Rock bit, and you can't bite off him. We've already seen this.
I'm basing it off of Switzerland. I'm not familiar with the Chris Rock bit, which I'm actually I'm really upset with myself that I'm not.
I have a question. Is there like an underground for ammo in Switzerland? I mean,
yeah.
Where were you saying that was implemented?
Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Is there I'm curious, is there like a black market for it? Like
No.
That's awesome. That's such a good idea.
But you have to also understand that like 90% of the Swiss population is conscripted, and they also have all of their guns at home, like fully automatic ones as well. But it's obviously in a different sort of context, because they're military trained, and they don't have the sort of problems that we do. But they also are expected to keep, or they I guess monitor how many rounds of ammo they have on hand at any given time. They allow them to have a certain amount at a range. It's a little bit different.
Sure, America and Switzerland are extremely different. You can't mirror the two countries based off of the gun ownership population. But the general idea of regulating ammo, I like that. I think it's they do it. Sure, a lot of people are in the military there. There's different factors, and no, we don't have to mirror everything, but that's the general idea that I took away from learning about their gun laws, and I like that idea. And I've been mulling it over and wondering, is that a way to do a workaround?
I mean, it's literally a Chris Rock bit.
For whatever, I mean, this
is like $1 million a bullet.
It is. I remember that.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you.
He definitely did that.
I remember that. It was like 15 years ago.
Well, he's on to something.
Well, my idea for this would be more akin to how you treat silencers and fully automatic weapons. Say semi-automatic weapons like we're just going to use the term assault rifle or whatever, put those in a sort of higher tier akin to silencers and fully automatic weapons that you have to pay a tax stamp for, and you have to go through enhanced background. We'll still allow them to have it, but make it a little bit further out of reach. I mean, I think that that's a better idea as far as how to do that. I also think that I think what they call them red flag laws are a good idea. It's about maybe perhaps finding a way to sell it appropriately to gun owners in a way that they understand that it's not necessarily the government kicking in your door and taking your guns permanently. It's just a temporary situation where we say, hey, this is a specific situation that we've been made aware of, and you are or are not able to have guns based upon this for X period of time. Correct. As long as you can sort of sell the due process component of that and make it not look like just an overreach and grab, I think you're going to be fine with something like that. I think that's a lot more positive of an approach. And I would personally, as a gun owner, find that to be a reasonable restriction.
Oh, sure. And I mean, the due process you get on the back end, right?
Correct. I mean, you just need to sort of sell that so they understand it, because I think a lot of people are just going to look at that and see it as being arbitrary government overreach. If you say it's based upon this specific set of circumstances.
Probable cause to say that this person might need to have their guns confiscated like that?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be probable cause, but maybe something akin to how you do probation and parole.
How does it work?
Like reasonable suspicion, which I think is a little bit lower standard. You have to have articulable reason for that seizure or that search. That's based a little bit more.
So I'm the girlfriend and I call the cops and I say, oh my gosh, I think my boyfriend, he just got mad at me. He might shoot me. Then they get to go take all his guns?
No, I mean, I think it's going to be more specific. It's got to be more specific on their part, like something more articulable.
Well, but I mean, we did also have,
obviously.
I think it's going to go ahead. Sorry.
But this is also getting back to like local gun laws, national level issues. We all remember that recent case, I believe it was out of Florida, where a woman was getting beaten by her boyfriend and he couldn't legally possess a gun at the time, and she brought the guns to the police, and then she was arrested for theft.
Yes,
right, because she broke into his house and took them. That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Situation. Like, yes, she absolutely had reason to be afraid. She should have communicated that to law enforcement or done some sort of thing, like a non-domestic stay away or something of the like, in order to just sort of set it up.
But they didn't prosecute her anyway. So.
Correct. They didn't end up doing it. But the whole point is still, you don't go and break in somebody's house and then take their guns and be like, they threatened me. Here, you need to have the proper agent take care of that.
I mean, but
it's a little hard though.
Sure, I mean, domestic situations are a lot more complex.
And usually, the police can't do anything until an act is done.
Correct,
and
which is why I think that maybe.
And so if someone you like seriously fear this guy is going to kill you, and he's sending you all these threats. He hasn't hit you. He hasn't come within 400 feet of you in violation of any kind of protective order. There hasn't been anything like that, but you know where his guns are and you're afraid. But the police can't go in and take it because he hasn't actually done anything yet.
Right, and that's why you need to have a properly articulated law to handle that that particular type of situation or something similar. I mean,
yeah, I just want to jump in here and say that the problem here is that the guy was already arrested. He was in custody at the time that his right to own firearms was removed. After that hearing, his wife/girlfriend, I don't remember which, drove to his house, went in, took the guns, and removed them. The problem there was that he never had the chance to turn in his guns, so he was never actually in violation of any law. It's just that simple. I mean, like, am I saying that's perfect? No. I think there are big problems with that. Do I think she was right to do it? Yeah, I do. I think she was right to do that, but
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's not an easy situation to deal with. It's complex.
Yeah, that's the thing that sucks in terms of. I'm sorry to step on you there, but like in terms as an act of self-preservation, yeah, absolutely do that. Might be illegal. Guess what? You know, you can worry about your legal troubles when you're still alive. That's really the only time. Yep. Sorry, Lace, go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't want to shift the conversation or anything, but I have a question because I've heard this. I actually, whenever the whole El Paso shooting happened, I texted like my dad and my little brother, and I was telling them like, we're better than this as a nation. And my little brother like personally called me and we got into an argument in the middle of a Monday work day. And he made me want to ask you actually a question, William, because one thing that he said, I'm not singling out or picking on you, but anyway, I guess I am picking on you. But one thing he said to me was, and I think this is honestly the dumbest argument in favor of like taking away people's guns, but that, well, you never know if the government, it's ever going to be a tyranny situation and you're going to need to defend yourself against the government. And he was serious as a heart attack. And like my knee-jerk reaction to that is you've been watching or listening to too many like Ben Shapiro's and Sean Hannity's, which I know those are two totally different things, but
are they though?
It's like, it's a right. They are. And I mean, look, they are. We know they are. I mean, look, Hannity is not very smart. Shapiro is at least smart. He's wicked, but he's smart.
Go ahead. I don't want to distract you. Go ahead.
Yeah, but my point is just that his thing about we're going to maybe need the guns, and he's not even a gun owner. And this isn't just him. I'm not singling out my little brother who's wonderful, but I've heard this from other people too. And it's, why, if you're going to take my guns, like people are going to rise up. It's going to be like tyranny. They're going to, first of all, I guess it's two different things, but people are going to fight back and not let you take their guns. But it's because they think that like the government's going to be coming for them and they need to be ready for the government, which I think is just insane.
Sure. Yeah. So
I'm curious what
are you
people
asking me,
think
are you
about
asking me
that.
what I think about the argument, or
Yeah.
or you asking me to sort of maybe explain the reasoning?
Yeah.
behind-
Yeah. Well, maybe just start with like, yeah, what do you think about the argument? Are
Right.
you for it, against it, and why?
Well, I mean, I could see where they're coming from. So, like, I do agree with people who think, well, that's just crazy. What a dumb argument that is. I mean, like, some people with a gun, they're never going to be able to like fight off an entire government, right? I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, if the U.S. government wants to take you out, I mean, I don't care if you've got like 1,000 other friends who have guns, you're not going to fight them off. So that's obviously not realistic. But I think where the people on the other side might say, where they might come from, is that people ultimately have a right to defend themselves, and even though it's you have like a snowball's chance in Hades of fighting off a government, you have a right to protect your own life, and so therefore you should have the right to have a firearm. And like what probably they would point to is like in the Germany, for example, and 1930s, the Nazis disarmed the Jewish people, and it was a lot easier to herd them into the concentration camps because they really couldn't have any kind of resistance or defend themselves. And so they
William, was there a significant resistance prior to that with firearms?
Was there prior to what, the disarmament of the Jews?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't think I don't think they tried to herd the Jews until they were already disarmed.
Okay, well,
No.
I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, was there a difference pre that policy and post?
Oh, well, I'm actually no expert on this, but what I read, I did read an article, and basically there was before Hitler took power, the Weimar Republic or whatever, they actually had like some kind of gun registry where basically they said, look, if you want to have a gun, just register it with the state so that we know who the gun owners are. The Weimar Republic was sort of this benevolent, not benevolent, but they weren't trying to kill people. And then what happened was the Nazis rushed into power, and they basically took advantage of the gun registries. Like, we know who all the gun owners are, so we're going to come after you and make you turn them in. So they basically like took something that was originally set up as sort of a benevolent registration process, and then they kind of used it against certain segments of the population.
So you think that the government would be able I'm sorry, RJ, you go.
He's
That's
pointing.
all
He's
on you.
pointing. He's pointing at you, Lace. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, but do you not, I guess that sounds like you don't trust the government.
Well, look, I trust the government. I mean, I'm not worried about people banging on my door. So, but I think the point, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate since you asked me. I think what they would say is look, the people that lived in Germany trusted the government until Hitler took over. But then eventually, you're basically saying nothing is ever going to happen in the future. There's no way that a tyrant is ever going to grab power. And then, so you're basically having faith that that's not going to happen. And that's, as we've seen in history, that does happen from time to time. And when it happens, it's better to be able to defend yourself than to basically be completely helpless. And I think that's what they would respond.
Well, and I agree with you, William. I think that that's a good point. And I wanted to just interject.
Yeah.
Totally as an aside, I love your headphones.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, these are awesome. These are HyperX. And they're not battery powered, so they never run out of power.
That's great, and the detail on the thread is amazing.
Yeah, they're well rated. I did a lot of research when I got these.
What are those called? I'm a little jealous. What are those
It's called HyperX.
HyperX. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
it's the it's like the model that came out in 2018, and it was like the most advanced. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they had like a series of them, and this was like the latest one. They feel great too, very comfortable.
No doubt, very nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyway,
they're great. They look great on camera.
Yeah, thanks.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, hell, let me throw this out there for free. I've also read that there were some Confederate states or some post-Civil War Southern states that passed laws disarming black people. There was like even in the Confederacy, they basically passed laws saying that free blacks couldn't own firearms. So they obviously it's a lot easier to burn a cross in somebody's yard or lynch them if they have no way to defend themselves. So I guess the people that promote that argument as a counterpoint would say, look, the fundamental right you should have is to be able, to defend yourself and your family, and therefore that's kind of sacrosanct and it should not be taken away, because you never know, even if it's not an almighty government coming after you, it could be thugs that support a fascist regime. It could be
sure.
No,
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, regardless of how we feel about the Second Amendment, I don't think anyone is trying to take away the fundamental ability for a person to protect themselves and their immediate property and family, right?
Yeah. Except for Lace, because she hates freedom.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's
no. Except for.
I'm kidding.
But I just want to say that it's not that the Constitution does not guarantee you a right to fight the Constitution, and I don't know how to make that any more clear, but
I agree.
You can't assume that a system of governance has built into it a way to undermine the system of governance. So the tyranny argument, to me, does not float.
Well, how I would respond to that is I would say that the people who wrote the Constitution, they themselves had just fought off a tyrannical government. I mean,
can I say what? I'm sorry, I was cutting you off. Continue, William. Finished.
I'm just basically saying that the people who did this, they actually had just fought off the British Empire and gotten their independence. So they had suffered through whatever taxation without representation and people garrisoning soldiers in their homes and so on and so forth. And they said,
they were traumatized.
Yeah, so it's like, we're going to take matters into our own hands. We're going to rebel. We're going to form this rebellion. We're going to arm ourselves. We're going to kill your British soldiers that are in our colonies, and we're going to form our own nation. So they had that mindset that, hey, if it could happen once, it could happen again. Now it seems like that would never happen. Now, I mean, I can't imagine.
Well, it's a hypothetical, and I do want to interject here that I am a Third Amendment absolutist, absolutely all the way Third Amendment. But laugh, lawyers, come on. Anyway.
I think that's funny.
Boo.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Drew. I appreciate that. That's what I was really looking for. But so the issue is, it's 2019. We've had all of these shootings. We have a problem with guns in our society. Guns in mass shootings, guns and gang violence, guns and suicide, guns and domestic violence. we're weighing this against, and again, and it's not that it's impossible, but at this stage of the game, it's improbable that we will need our firearms to protect us, either for most of the legitimate reasons that people have for saying self-defense, and I'm not saying that should be discounted at all, but much less probable than that. I mean, what are the odds you're going to need a gun to defend your life unless you work in law enforcement or the military? It's astronomically low, right? Again, that's not a reason to take anything away.
You live in Orleans Parish?
Within reason.
If you live in Detroit,
There was a shooting outside of my house the other day.
Yeah,
I mean, not the other day, but there was.
I mean,
in terms, okay, yes, there are specific variables.
I don't own a
there,
gun.
Okay? No, I understand that.
Anyway, and
I'm the German Shepherd.
There you go. He'll protect you. And less likely than that is that we're going to need these firearms to fight our government, who have tanks and bombs and drones and all of these things. And even if there are millions of us with guns, armed insurrection, this is this weird doomsday kind of scenario.
But I would also argue
that is not built into the Constitution.
I know it's not. And it goes to your point from earlier that like the Constitution doesn't really give you like the means to fight the Constitution, right?
That's why I think they should just take away all the like automatic things. Like let people have a pistol for protection. Let people have a hunting rifle again if they are like well qualified and spend a lot of money.
But you get into this conversation of, well, where do you draw the line, right? And why do I have to lose my X because somebody else did Y, right? We keep having this back and forth in the gridlock, and what fuels a lot of it is honestly the gun lobby, because they're there for gun sales. And anything you do, and Haley mentioned this earlier, anything you do to make it harder to sell firearms, they're going to be against. And a lot of like these mom and pop gun shops, they're going to be against anything because it's red tape. It's another hurdle that's going to turn more people away, right? From even if they have all the legitimate reasons and are completely legal about the process, that if it's harder, less people will do it. That's just human nature, right? So what is going to get them on board? Because if we're being realistic, we have a Supreme Court that is, controlled by originalists. So we're not going to see anything happen realistically in terms of a significant curtailment of the Second Amendment. We're not going to see a constitutional amendment repeal or revision. We're not going to see any substantive gun control legislation push through without the support of the Republicans, because we're never going to get 60 senators who are Democrats who are for gun control and beat the filibuster unless we first get rid of the filibuster. Like none of this stuff is going to happen, right? Unless we get both sides on board.
A question.
Go ahead.
So let's just say that you could have all of that. Let's say you had 9 liberal justices on the Supreme Court and you had 80 Democrat senators, and you could do whatever you wanted to do.
Hooey.
So let's say that happens. What law would you pass? Like, if you could ban guns, for example, what would the penalty be? What would your dream law be?
I think.
Can I go?
Go ahead, RJ. I want to hear this.
Okay. It is illegal to own a semi-automatic gun. All semi-automatic guns are banned. If you want to own a gun, you can, and you can hold it at an armory. There will be armories that are designated for every district, let's say, possibly several per district, depending on how big they are. And honestly, that's pretty much the end of my wish list.
Okay, but let me ask you. So let's say someone violates that law. Let's say they've got an automatic gun and they fire it in their backyard, or they kill somebody with it. What would the penalty be for doing that?
The penalty be for
violating the gun law that you just stated.
Death.
All right. So okay. So what if we did this? What if we passed a law that said, look, anytime you maliciously use a weapon, a gun of any kind, pistol, whatever, you fire at somebody with the intention to harm or kill them, there's like a mandatory 50-year sentence, federal hate crime 50-year sentence. that would probably have a pretty big dent. And who could really argue against something like that?
No, I mean, we could have that too.
You see what I'm saying? But I'm saying that you could basically get what you want without having to fight the gun people.
We sort of already have sentencing enhancements for firearms crimes.
Yeah.
Right, but so amp it up. So say make it like a 25, 30.
I mean,
40.
yeah, that's sort of like what it is, though.
But you have to do something about the firearms at some point.
Well,
like, at some point, and right now we're talking about fairy tale land, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So in fairy tale land, I would snap my fingers and I would say semi-automatic weapons are banned. If you own one, I guess we'll buy it back. I mean, like that's really more of a tax question. But beyond that, you can hold your weapons at an armory. You don't have a personal right to hold or to own a weapon, as the Second Amendment is written. And beyond that, I think we've solved our problem.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, so do you think it's feasible? Let's say that you had the political capital to do that. You know, we have like over 300 million people in the country. I mean, how realistic is it that we could confiscate, you know, through whatever means?
It's unlikely because I was snapping my fingers and making that happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not against, you know, what you're suggesting in principle. I'm really actually not a gun person. It's not an issue that I care that much about one way or the other, to be honest with you. I'm open to arguments from both sides, you know, and I just try to be kind of, you know,
I think William, I appreciate the question. I think the real question is, are we going to directly confront the fact that America has a very unique gun?
William, I
appreciate the question.
What's going on here?
It's kind of weird audio.
eBarb is getting some feedback.
Hey, yeah, Brian, I know you're having trouble with your mic. By the way, welcome to the call. But you can't play the video and be in the call at the same time.
eBarb is getting some feedback. Hey, yeah, Brian, I know you're having trouble with your.
I will throw this out there real quick. Is that David mentioned he was a strong supporter of the Third Amendment to the Constitution, which basically says that no soldier shall be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner. So obviously, the guys that wrote the Constitution were heavily influenced, you know, by their experiences, and this likely shaped their crafting of the Second Amendment. So, you know, even though we might kind of scoff at that kind of reasoning now because it seems ridiculous that somebody could fight off a government, the founders seem to think that was possible because they actually did that, which is why they wrote the Constitution the way they did.
Gotcha. Sorry, we're in the middle of
troubleshooting,
technical difficulties. I guess Drew, could you explain to me? You need to check his mic settings and.
Yeah, eBarb, you might want to unplug and replug in your headphones. Well, that's some angry typing.
That is some super angry typing.
Am I coming through loud and clear? Do I need to do anything?
No, you're fine. We just had Brian join, and we've currently experiencing technical difficulties. That is some angry Kermit the Frog. I'm not going to take your shit kind of. That's exactly what it sounds like.
Fuck you, homeowners association.
I was going to say one of the things that I was thinking of in terms of the solution. Sorry, I've kind of missed what was going on before that, but like the wave a magic wand, you can do anything legislatively you want. I think it's not so much firearms that need. I mean, not that there should be no additional limits placed, but that it's not so much the issue with firearms, but it's with the people using them, right? That I think gun owners should be licensed and have to pass regular psychological evaluations and proficiency evaluations in order to maintain their license. Like a car. And we don't do it like a car because it's a constitutional amendment, and we have this stupid argument about, a constitutional right to bear arms. My big issue with that is that this thing is not sacrosanct. Even the Constitution is not sacrosanct. It was written by people, who were honestly not even that necessarily that old, some of them. And these were ideas they had at the time, and they could not have foreseen where we are now and what's going on. Hang on a second. Oh, sorry. Anyway. And I don't think they would have fully grasped. And even if they disagreed, like, they're just people, right? These are not gods. Like our founders are not gods. Okay. The Constitution is not handed down from heaven. Okay. We wrote this. We can change it if we want to. There's nothing deeper binding it other than our will to not mess with what the founders said. And it's killing a lot of people, what the founders said, if under the current interpretation. I don't have a problem with changing it. Again, not currently politically feasible. So I'm willing to see other steps be taken that enjoy bipartisan support, and get the gun lobby the hell out of there, and get some legislators in that actually look like and represent our population rather than special interests.
But yeah, you bring up a good point though. Is the founders, they're not infallible. I mean, they, obviously it's not, they didn't write a constitution that was never to be changed. They actually put in a process that you could change the Constitution through the amendment process, and it's actually been modified a number of times, and including amendments have been repealed outright. So why not try to develop a national consensus to repeal the Second Amendment?
Well,
gun lobbies.
Because it's politically radioactive is why. Sorry, yes. I'm reading the side text. Oh,
gun
boy.
lobbies have too loud of a voice. I mean, Haley just said it. I mean, it's the gun lobbies. It's their. I mean, you can't even study guns, right? Like, don't they prevent the government from even studying guns?
I mean,
exactly,
indirectly, but yes.
Yes, the Dickey Amendment. Yes.
You can't even educate yourself. That's so typical. Like, you're not even allowed to we're not going to educate ourselves on this.
Gotcha. Hey, Brian, I'm sorry. I know you're just in there. They're texting. Sorry you can't join. He seems to be disagreeing with pretty much all of us about everything. I would love to hear more of that. Unfortunately, technical difficulties are preventing that. So maybe next round you can join us and tell us why we're all wrong in hopefully a civil and respectful manner.
I guarantee you he will be.
Okay, cool. Is he a friend of yours?
Yeah, he is.
Oh, cool.
He is.
Cool. So we should kick him out of the group then, is what you're saying.
Probably. No, he's respectful. He's well spoken and knowledgeable.
No, that's cool though. It's cool. No, I want dissent here, but that's the thing is because this is such a divisive topic. This is why nothing has happened, because we just fight about shit and nothing happens, right? This is we're sick of it, all of us, and that's there's 3 shootings in a weekend plus all the regular shootings that happen on a weekend in the summer anyway in big cities and whatever. We're not getting anywhere. I'm tired of it. This is why people are talking about a full repeal of the Second Amendment, of mandatory gun buybacks, and all these things, these more draconian measures that are just there's just complete red line for so many people in America. That there needs to be something that we're working towards together, with the idea of safety while still respecting the rights of gun owners and people who are using it responsibly.
Well, right, and I think that's the central question, right? How are we going to make it so that we can respect the rights of gun owners and protect innocence? And no one in America has suggested that there is some bridge there. So far, it's everyone gets all the guns they want, and if you get shot, that's a problem, but it's too bad. Or nobody gets the guns they want, and it's extremely difficult to get shot.
Yeah, that's the rub.
Hey, let me ask you guys another question. Have you thought that, so this is just looking at the problem from a completely different angle here, but, people have correctly pointed out that when this Constitution was written, over 200 years ago, things were way different back then. We didn't have machine guns and all these other things, right? So, or like, grenades or whatever. And so obviously you can't just throw everything. You can't, people don't have a right to maybe buy grenades, under the Second Amendment, right? But as we move into the future, technology is going to continue to change. And what are you guys going to do when everybody has a 3D printer that can just print out their own gun? I mean, it's going to basically essentially be impossible to say people can't sell guns anymore where they can print out their own things with a 3D printer, or have some other weapon. They can build their own bombs, for example. Has nothing to do with guns. They can just get the right chemicals and just do whatever. If the people want to kill people, they can, even if you ban every single gun in the United States, they can find other ways to do it.
I think, to me, the response to that is, yes, if someone is truly motivated, you can drive over people in a truck, you can make chemical bombs, you can, all these other things. If someone is truly motivated to do so, the problem is we have a unique problem, and it's based on the ease of access to firearms specifically. Like, that we don't see this in other. I heard this more politically correct term of more like high income nations or more developed nations, that our problem is unique amongst developed nations in terms of this kind of violence, and the only significant difference is the availability of firearms and the lack of restriction on their possession. That's why we have all the shootings, and so we don't see a giant rash of like Molotov attacks in other countries that are killing thousands of people every year, or driving through crowds attacks that kill thousands of people every year per country. That these things happen as one-off events. They're not that common. But I've shot guns. Like I said, I own guns. I've shot an AR before. A drugged monkey could do it, right? It's really easy to use, and it's designed to be. If you put that in the hands of someone who just feels like it, they don't have to be a professional. They just have to have some basic competencies, and lots of people die really fast, as we've seen, over this past weekend. And that's the key difference. That won't stop murder. That won't stop mass murder, period. But the effect it'll have overall, I think, is going to be vast and significant.
I also don't really like the argument of the Constitution is old, and we're at a different time. They didn't think about people being able to shoot off 1,000 bullets in a short amount, couple of minutes kind of technology or something. They also probably wouldn't understand Twitter, but we're still able to apply principles of private ownership, freedom of speech, and everything. It's the Constitution is the tool that we use to govern ourselves. We know how to mend it. That's sort of just getting marred down by literal, a literal interpretation and everything. We still are able to understand that what freedom of speech means in today's world, even though the people who wrote it didn't know about Twitter or Facebook or computers. The newspapers were written by printing presses and ink, and now it's a totally different world, but it can still apply. So I also don't like that argument either. I just want to throw that out there. I just think it's stupid.
Okay.
I agree. I actually heard an interview on YouTube where somebody was interviewing Scalia several years ago. Well, probably not that long ago, and he was basically talking about how it would
have to be several years ago.
Yeah, and I think it was in 2012 or something. I could be wrong, but at any rate, he was talking about how a lot of the things have obvious corollaries to the modern age. So the printing press, freedom of the press. I mean, that would apply to someone printing something on a web page, a news organization on a web page. Same principle, even though it's not the exact same mechanism and things like that. And so there are some things that were genuinely unique to our age, but a lot of the things are easily compatible with what the people wrote back then.
What were you going to say, RJ? RJ?
Oh, pardon?
You were starting to say something.
Oh, thank you. No, I was going to say that, returning to something that we were talking about earlier, that we're not even studying the idea that gun violence is a problem. And the reason that we're not is the 1996 Dickey Amendment, but also because we won't fund it through the CDC. Earlier this year, or it might have been in 2018, the Republicans allowed the CDC to study the effect of gun violence on public health, but it hasn't been funded. And that seems like a really easy way for everyone to come together and say, like, hey, let's look at gun violence as something that might affect the public health of Americans. I think we should do that.
So I should probably just give Brian Ebarb a plug. He's making a lot of comments about their various things. I don't know if I can scroll through the history or whatever. Oh yeah, here it is. But he seems to be very much on the pro-gun side, and I was wondering if anybody wanted to let's look at some of his comments. Like what's this last one? 2013 study about defensive gun use. It's like that, and
yeah. But it's not using the term gun or firearm. I mean, come on. The CDC has not been using the term gun or firearm.
So I guess you can respond to that, and I don't know anything about it either way.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough to do in a chat, but the underlying problem here is that the CDC uses the term lethal methods. They don't use the term somebody killed themselves with a shotgun. They don't use the term somebody shot a bunch of people with an automatic weapon, which is very rare because they're, a tax stamp that is very expensive and cannot have been manufactured after 1986. So
yeah. He posted a link to Forbes, and the article is the time that the CDC asked about defensive gun uses. And it looks like, I'm just kind of quickly looking through it, but it seems like I guess the gist of the study is that people use guns defensively at least as often as they use them.
Yeah, but that's not the question, right?
So,
the question is, do people kill themselves with guns?
Brian?
Yes.
Well, that would be sort of the whole point of it is defensive gun use, though.
So let's say
you're not going to defend yourself by shooting yourself.
Yeah, let's say that you're a woman
I might
in a house and a rapist tries to break in, for example. That could be a valid use of a gun.
Sure, and let's say that happens once a year for the purposes of this discussion. And let's say that 100 times a year someone shoots themselves in the head.
Right.
Okay. So what's the gross product of that?
So you're saying your side would be it's kind of a summation, like if more harm is done, if more people are murdered or suicidal as a result of this, let's say it's 100 to 1 or whatever the ratio is, then it's still a better common good to put a.
I would term it utilitarian. Yes.
So that's a good point. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but again, because I do want to emphasize, I'm not really a gun person. I don't spend a lot of time looking at this. It's not really my thing, but I mean, I guess I'm just trying to play, since the rest of the panel is decidedly gun restriction. I'm just trying to provide some balance.
No.
And we appreciate
That's
that.
Not how I am. I'm not that way at all. I'm probably more aligned with Ebarb on a lot of the gun legislation related details, but
I think half of the people on this panel are gun owners. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've never owned a gun, so I mean, I have no interest in it. I don't want anything to do with them. I don't like them. So I mean, I'm really kind of ambivalent on the issue.
And I mean, that's fine. I hunt, so yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time killing animals. I just can't do it. So I
do not have a hard time.
It's funny. I own guns. I've never had the first thought about using them to hunt. Like that's just, I don't know. in my mind. I know they're for that, but I don't see myself as a hunter. But like, again, there are other reasons. Again, it's a self-defense thing. It's about, protecting, your house, your family, your immediate surroundings. Also knowing that, trying to be responsible. I have a safe, keep them in the safe, keep them locked up, and like, also like, I know that I'm not proficient enough because I don't go to the gun range every week or whatever, that like I have no business trying to be, the white hat cowboy in a situation. And that just goes back to what I was saying before, like the good guy with a gun myth. And that's the problem with most of them. But anyway, I digress. Anybody else? Comments from other gun owners?
I use mine to shoot cute animals, so.
Oh yeah. Are they delicious?
They are very delicious.
Well,
the cuter they are, the tastier they are, honestly. So
it's the taste of innocence.
Yeah.
And yet we're the ones here talking
You're
about.
You're muted, RJ. Get muted.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you, Drew. One of the things that I've always wondered about is obviously major shootings that make all of the papers and are the front page on all the websites. We never see the pictures. And I wonder what that would do to this conversation.
The pictures of what?
The pictures of the calamity that results from a mass shooting.
Dead bodies.
Dead bodies.
Yeah.
No. But I'm sorry to overstep there, but I wonder what would have happened after Sandy Hook if we had to look at children 6 and 7 years old blown to pieces in their schoolrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what America would have done after that, because we did shit. We did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Literal nothing. But little children were blown into bits. And they were blown to bits by really effective and well-designed, guns.
Killing machines.
Yeah. No, that's what they're there for, right? Like, the bullet hole that goes in is smaller than the bullet hole that goes out. But if we saw those pictures, I don't think we would be sitting here having this conversation anymore.
It's just about understanding, like, what is actually at issue. Like understanding what the consequences are. It's I've seen doctors. There's that whole "stay in your lane" hashtag that doctors have been tagging on Twitter, and they're posting the aftermath of having to deal with trauma after a gun shooting in the arm, and those pictures aren't pleasant, and it's not like trying to shock people into having these kinds of emotional reactions of seeing a bunch of dead babies shot up. This is what these guns can do, and this is what happened. And do we actually have the understanding of what happens in a mass shooting? I haven't been in a mass shooting. I've read personal accounts and everything. I've followed that Twitter feed of the doctors, and it's my understanding that some of those bullets can basically like blow off a limb. Like the hole that leaves your body is bigger than an orange. And, if you get hit, if you're hit anywhere close to center, you're dead. So I don't think we understand that.
But yeah, I understand. To an extent, like hollow point bullets and things like that expand once they hit a target and stuff like that, and they can create a much bigger damage area than just a lot of people think of like a solid metal bullet. Like a lot of people just call them like training rounds or whatever that don't do that kind of damage. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and RJ, I hear what you're saying too. And it's not, you can characterize that as just an emotional argument or an emotional appeal, but I think what's important about it is that we get into this very sort of legal, it is, you know, legalistic, bloodless, semantic argument about, you know, like specifications of different kinds of firearms and, you know, rounds per minute, and, you know, and dicker over the, you know, the Second Amendment, and all the gun pedant stuff, which I generally can't stand, you know, in conversations like this, and juxtaposed it to, say, like what I saw today on Twitter was a picture from in the aftermath of the Dayton shooting. It was a gurney, hospital gurney in an operating room, or I guess operating table in the operating room, and it was just covered in blood. It was like soaked all across the table down to the floor. There's pools of blood on the floor. Like, this is what we're, no body or anybody else was present. It was just an empty room with all this blood everywhere. Like, this is the reality of what we're talking about. This is when we have this, this push the glasses up your nose kind of, irritating semantic debate about something that is costing lots of lives. And I don't think we should necessarily legislate from the point of emotion because of that, but it should bring us back to the focus of what the issue is. To me, that's what's important about that kind of imagery, because that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about the Sandy Hook victims. We're talking about, the El Paso victims. We're talking about all of this stuff that won't stop because we're not doing anything to stop
it. And then we get responses like, we need ARs to kill 30 to 50 feral hogs and stuff, rather than like dealing with the reality of like, look at what these things can do to people.
Yeah.
How about a fence? Like, why are we having this talk?
I think a big part of it, Haley, is that people are freaking out because they're pushing that narrative of, oh, if they take our guns, we can't fight the government when they come at us. And I'm like, man, if the Democrats take over the government, what are they going to do? Give people health care?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Make sure gay people aren't discriminated against.
I know it sounds terrible. Well, I'll tell you
It's
one
so
thing.
tyrannical.
Well, let me tell you about Tennessee a little bit. We have I just saw this on a local publication, came out a couple hours ago, in Coffee County, Tennessee, which is I think a couple hours from here. The Republican Party chair of that county he shared a meme of Rand Paul saying, "Say gun control one more time, because this is how close we are from a civil war and hanging corrupted politicians in front of the White House." Like, that's the level. This is the guy. This is the party chair. His name is Richard Brooks, by the way, and you're an idiot, Richard Brooks. Just want to throw that out there. But that's what we deal with in this conversation, is that people here, we're obviously disagreeing. There's a side chat going that's getting a little vitriolic, I think. But like, that's the problem, that we do this crap, and it just continues until we all get bored a week from now. Or I said vitriolic, yeah. Oh, he said #vitriolic. Okay. Sometimes I mispronounce big words. I'm only partially educated. But
you're fine.
Thanks. And that's what happens. You have this absolutist, no, nothing, you're not going to take my guns, even talk about it, and we're going to, start intimating civil war and hanging people, which is not a good look in Tennessee, by the way, or anywhere, to be fair. But particularly in Tennessee, we have a history of lynchings and what have you. We're not doing anything. People are just gonna die again in a week, or less than a week. In the next mass shooting, the next crazed lunatic who has seen the popularity enjoyed by these three individuals in this past week, and they want to do what they did, just like this guy. The El Paso guy was inspired in part by the New Zealand shooter. Because he made mention of it in his manifesto, we have to stop this. We have to come together. People who say dumb things like this, they don't help the conversation. But I think even people who have this spirit of dissent, like Brian here, who I'm not really catching all of what's going on. Like, I really want to hear what he has to say about solutions. Because if we don't bring people like this on board, it's never going to go anywhere unless those people and the rest of us get the politicians and the lobbyists out of the way of what we want to make our country safer, our country is never going to get safer. That's my final thought on it. Everybody, we've been going like an hour and a half, guys, so we should probably wrap here. So I'd like to get final thoughts from other people, and then I'll probably close it out. Anybody?
I think that's a good final thought. Just, yeah, I mean, what is the solution then? Because, you know, do some people literally want nothing to happen? You know, what are we going to do about this? Are some people not seeing and thinking that we have a problem? I mean, that's really the question. Are they has a portion of the population become, all of us are desensitized to these mass shootings now, but do some people not see them as a problem? You know, the massive, not even mass shootings, just the massive amount of gun violence. Like, is that not an issue? I'd like to do something. I'd like to hear what everyone wants to do, but I think the first question is, like, do y'all want to do something? So
right, I agree with you, and the answer from the American population is no.
But is it from the American population?
Yes. Yes. We've done nothing. We've done nothing.
The American people and our handlers are not necessarily the same thing, right?
I agree.
And I think the answer from our handlers is no.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's enough space in there to say that they've been dick. Like, Sandy Hook happened. There were a bunch of children blown into pieces, and we did nothing. To believe that another tragedy or a couple tragedies stacked on top of one another is going to change anything is naive. We already made our decision. This is baked into the equation. We don't care. This is part of the Second Amendment. That's where I am.
Okay.
Well, I guess where I'd say I am is, you know, I think there's some support for the red flag laws. We could at least do that, and maybe do more background checks, and amp up the penalties for maliciously using a firearm against a human being. I mean, why not? I mean, why not just make it a mandatory, at least 20-year penalty just for firing a weapon and malice at someone else, and that would discourage a lot of people, I think, from using. I mean, if they knew that, hey, if I use a gun against somebody, I'm going to go away for a very long time. You know, and it's pretty much guaranteed. Just even if they survive, you know, even if they live, just for firing a weapon at them, I'm going to go away for a long time. That would probably be pretty powerful deterrent, I would imagine.
Okay. Anybody else? Lace, have you gone yet? Did you already do your bit? Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of the side chat and our video chat at the same time.
Okay, sorry.
I've got too many irons in the fire. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I guess my only thoughts are, like I said, I think the core of the problem are the people that truly believe that if they forfeit their weapons, like, they won't be able to defeat the government in an impending war, which I think is crazy. I think people should be entitled to have like a protection weapon for the family, but nothing automatic. And that's just how I feel.
Okay. That's fair. I mean, we're here for our fermented opinions.
Yeah.
Haley, you went Drew.
I think I pretty much gave you guys the thrust of what I thought was a good compromise idea, and that was enhancing red flag type laws or of something of the sort, as well as protecting due process interests of gun owners. I also thought it was maybe perhaps a not the worst idea to maybe go along the lines of maybe a tax stamp or something like NFA type things for maybe more specific types like of maybe attachments, say like high caps, and what I mean when I say high cap, I mean like one of those 100-round drums. Like I think those are stupid. But yeah, I mean it's stuff like that I think is going to be much more positive and potentially able to be passed type of legislation. I mean, that's sort of where I stand on it, but maybe I haven't articulated it appropriately.
No, I mean, that's good. What I'm hearing is kind of a common thread about, what are these red flag type laws, which is really funny that this crowd is well, I mean, I'm sure he's reversed his position already, but it is more or less agreed with sentiment from Donald Trump from earlier in the week, about the ideas that, if these, red flags come, and on all the shooters that we have been referring to this whole time, like all had significant red flags that have come up in their history, that maybe something, and I think even one, and it's because of the weak background checks, was able to falsify information and buy his website. I think that was a California guy, but someone can feel free to correct me on that. But anyway, and Brian, sorry, man, that you're kind of in the wings of this thing, but you're kind of hot into this conversation at the same time. We'll try and work out the technical bugs and get you on sort of full steam next time, and we can kind of iron all that stuff out. But we've been going for like an hour and 40 minutes now, and I think it's time to call it. I want to thank everybody for coming on and participating. Shout out to Ross Janes at Janes Media. JamesMedia.com. He makes all the bells and whistles work for us. He's our digital wizard. Please check us out. If you're watching this now on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel for more cool fermented content like this. We have a Facebook page and group by the same name, Fermenting Opinions. We are also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, a podcast, Fermenting Opinions. You can check us out on iTunes, Beyond Pod, or wherever you get your podcast listening on. I'm David Papiden. James McVeigh is not with us tonight, but he's with us in spirit, yelling about the Second Amendment and originalism. Love you, James. And all that said, I'm out, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you all.
Good night.